Oh, by the way, I'm Walden Schmidt.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Walden Schmidt.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Coming into the Harper residence, that was pretty awesome. That will go down as one of the most memorable experiences of my life.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso. And I've talked a lot about 2.5 Men in the past, and I'll probably continue to do so in the future, so why not follow up that trend by doing it here in the present? We all know the drama that ensued when the show lost one of its leads and had to scramble to find a replacement. They fired Charlie Sheen, and then they brought us the dude from Punk'd and went, well, there you go. Deal with it. And a lot of us didn't. But from the ashes of Charlie Harper rose Walden Schmidt. Quite literally, actually. A lot of fans of the show feel like the Walden Schmidt character killed 2.5 Men. But I'd actually argue that 2.5 Men killed the Walden Schmidt character.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Now hear me out, there is more to that thought, as the runtime of this video would probably tell you. When Charlie Sheen was fired from 2.5 Men, those in charge ran to anyone and everyone they felt could strike interest. If you were considered a draw, they were penciling you in. Anyone with a name and some availability got a phone call around this time. Hugh Grant almost signed up to replace Charlie. Except he wouldn't have been Walden Schmidt, he would have been some other character with a completely different name, backstory, and accent.
They talked to me about it, but the problem was they didn't have a script or a new character. They just said, trust us, we'll create one. It's all to do with a very tight time schedule. What they created for Ashton Kutcher was clearly something completely different from what they would have created for me.
Yeah. But going forward, during the year, we still had to invent a relationship and a character, and we had to do it in a hurry.
It's clear that there wasn't a clear plan here.
Honestly, I guess we could say it now. We were truly guessing.
The show was desperate for someone of note, and in that desperation, they found Sir Michael Kelso.
Mike is like, are you going on 2.5 Men? And I was like, I can't talk about that. And then you were the only person that actually knew before anyone. Yeah. And you said to me, don't go on 2.5 Men.
My concern was the same as everybody else. Like, what if they don't like it? What if we fail?
The character of Walden Schmidt wasn't clear for anyone, including show creator Chuck Lorre. Chuck Lorre met up with Ashton Kutcher to discuss the possibility of working together and what exactly this role would require. He pitched the idea of playing a famous actor with wealth beyond anyone's wildest dreams. And I imagine that that's the same tactic he used to lure in Charlie, and then he sweetened the pot by saying, oh, and the character's name is Charlie. Ashton was interested in the part, not just for the paycheck, but for the role. Only for him to be told at last minute, yeah, no, scratch that. We're not doing that. You're just going to play yourself.
We started out talking about the idea of an actor, a famous actor. And after he said, yes, I'll do it, I called him one day and said, I changed my mind. I don't want to go that route.
And while Ashton Kutcher never could and never did replicate Charlie's casual, stoic, straight-faced sarcasm, he did at least bring his own unique energy to set.
He's cute. He really is, though.
Their creative plans began and ended with, get a big name.
We knew in broad strokes that we wanted Ashton to be playing a younger character, a more energetic character.
We were finding this stuff out as we went. We didn't know when we started.
We knew that we wanted his attitude about women to be completely different than Charlie's had been.
Charlie's premature departure really led to the show spinning the relevance wheel and lucking out by landing on the Dude Where's My Car guy. And yes, whether you like the seasons or not, they were very lucky to get him. And you never felt like he was just there for a paycheck, even if he was. He didn't show it, he put effort in. Throughout his entire time on the show, it's clear the guy's really trying to make this work. Replacement characters are often immediately hated by viewing audiences. Audiences that have become accustomed to another actor's performance, or another character that they've come to know and love. But I don't think that was the case with Walden. At least, not entirely. There's just something nice about Ashton Kutcher as this character. He's genuinely charismatic and accidentally charming. He's a very likable lead. And what I love the most is that Ashton wasn't trying to do his usual Michael Kelso shtick. There were definitely elements there, but it wasn't that character to a T. He wasn't the big dumb guy who says a bunch of stupid shit and yells a lot. Which, let's be honest, is kind of what Ashton Kutcher made a career off of. that and, of course, underwear modeling, Walden Schmidt is actually shown to be extremely intelligent. He's a tech genius who became a billionaire after selling his apps to Microsoft. Walden was a good-looking, smart guy with a seemingly endless bank account and a broken heart. He was pathetic Tony Stark. Despite his book smarts, his street smarts, well, they left a little something to be desired. The guy is constantly swindled into continuing to let Alan live in what is now his beach house, rent-free. He's gullible and far too trusting of people. His selflessness is only matched by his obliviousness. He's far too optimistically naive. It's like our idiot brother, if your idiot brother also just so happened to be Bruce Wayne. While Walden has a beyond genius level intellect, he's still very emotionally immature. He's like a child in a young man's body with the bank account of a much older man. This was an interesting character with some complex, self-conflicting intricacies.
Oh, how can you be so smart about some things and so stupid about others?
Okay, wait, just to be clear, what am I smart about and what am I stupid about?
Kind of try to build Walden in a way that would have certain capacities to sort of ring everybody's bell.
The Walden Schmidt character, for everything he had going against him, actually surprisingly showed some promise. Not to mention that I think that Ashton Kutcher surprisingly had really great chemistry with Jon Cryer. Even in the show's worst episodes, I think that Walden and Alan's back and forth banter almost makes it worth it. They're on their A game, properly matching each other's energy each and every episode. Despite their dynamics somewhat growing stale as time went on, I still believe Cryer and Kutcher were putting on a hell of a performance. I get the feeling that these two really liked working with each other, which is probably also why Jon Cryer made an appearance on Ashton Kutcher's show, The Ranch.
No, actually, we've met before.
It's also kind of fun watching him bro out with Jenny, or watching him bond with Jake, or getting hit on by Berta. Kutcher's debut on the show meant a complete changing of form. Essentially, the whole show changed. The tone of the series became much less reality-grounded, and much more cartoonish in nature. There was a real sense of anything could happen at any point in time. You know, because it's a TV show. No longer was it trying to provide an interesting story or develop characters. The show is now telling jokes for the sake of telling jokes. In the original 2.5 Men, the show saw plenty of heartfelt moments and plenty of arcs change characters' narratives and built them up and developed them as people. The last heartfelt moment the series has to offer is when Alan is talking to his brother's urn. And then one moment later, Ashton Kutcher shows up. In the literal second that he shows up on screen, the show is forever changed. This scene is a changing of the guard, a forced passing of the torch. This series was no longer taking itself seriously. So why should any of its audience? The show became the very definition of low comedy. Not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but it's definitely not what this series was up until this point. Personally, I like both, but changing the tonal structure of a successful series may create some dissonance. As soon as Ashton signed on, the show seemed very, very aware of what it was. And very, very well aware that the sand in the hourglass was starting to run out. Drinking jokes became smoking jokes. There were less subtle jabs and much more over-the-top humor. This was a completely different show.
You know, we decided that we didn't want to try and duplicate what we'd already done, because quite frankly, we've done 8 years of it.
They have created not only a new character, but they really turned the show on its side and made it into something else.
It's really two different shows.
It is tonally different, it is substantially different, it has a completely different feel.
The show now appeals to, instead of this amount of people, it appeals to this people. Like, it's just a different level of funny.
But it's not like it just stopped being what it was. It became some other thing.
Kutcher's involvement changed everything, but as far as I'm concerned, that was bound to happen regardless of who replaced Charlie Sheen. If Hugh Grant had stepped into the role, I think that we would see something much different from the Ashton Kutcher years of 2.5 Men. But also something completely different from the Charlie Sheen years of 2.5 Men. The introduction of Walden Schmidt also led to a couple of new character dynamics. Although, unfortunately, it was mostly the same dynamic over and over and over again. Character meets Walden, character bangs Walden or spends the running time talking about wanting to bang Walden, and that's it. Outside of that, we get to meet Walden's mother, his ex-wife, his old best friend and business partner, and all of these characters stuck around for a bit and advanced some plots. They weren't one and dones, they became part of the world of 2.5 Men. We also got to meet the many, many, many women of his love life. Walden Schmidt was hopelessly in love with the idea of being in love, defining every potential love interest as the one. Within 4 years on the show, he proposes to 3 people. And while I don't think that that is necessarily the worst character trait you can give a character, don't overdo it, otherwise you end up in Ted Mosby territory, and nobody wants that. The big issue here is that, for one reason or another, Ashton Kutcher doesn't have any chemistry with any of Walden's love interests. Never once does the show at any point come close into putting him into a relationship that feels genuine. I think the closest they got was him and Bridget. They really did come off like exes from time to time. But then again, that could just be because Bridget was being played by Judy Greer, who is everybody's ex-wife for some reason. But that's really where it ends. And that sucks, because Walden's love life ate up a lot of screen time. I'm not saying that these actresses were bad, because I liked the vast majority of their performances. But when they were paired with Ashton, I don't know, none of them seemed to click. While Ellen's relationships were unrealistically dysfunctional, Walden's were undeniably boring. Almost every relationship he was put into ended abruptly. Maybe because the producers realized it wasn't working, but more likely because the writers couldn't figure out how to end things. Case in point, this show. In a lot of ways, this Great White Dope was the show's Great White Hope. He was pretty good, until he wasn't anymore. There were always issues with this character, even from his first appearance. They started Ashton off strong, but maybe a little bit too strong. I think the show really fucked up by overcompensating for the loss of Charlie by trying to make Walden God's gift to humanity, or at least God's gift to Chuck Lorre. They gave Walden the world the second that they handed Ashton the key to Charlie Sheen's chocolate factory. And no, that is not a euphemism. They gave this character every positive trait a person could have. He's overly kind, generous, good-hearted, irresistible to women, despite their sexual orientations, apparently.
Maybe I'm not gay.
He had more money than anyone who has ever been on the show. And not to mention, he had an enormously huge...
Please stand by.
The guy was given the world. It's like Alan had 99 problems and Walden didn't even have one. Though I'm pretty sure that's not actually how that song goes. It didn't help matters that in order to further the narrative that Walden was here to stay and was a proper replacement, everyone who came in contact with Charlie and Walden would favor the newer man as opposed to the former.
Hi, is Charlie here?
Charlie passed away.
I'm sorry, he was just such a terrific guy. I can't believe he's gone. Hello, I'm Penelope.
Walden, what are you crying about?
I have no idea.
The fact that he had far more pros than cons meant that no one could realistically relate to this character. And because the character was almost always portrayed in a more positive light, having episodes showcase him as being the voice of reason or the helping hand, it meant that you didn't necessarily want to see bad things happen to him. Unless you actually wanted to see bad things happen to Ashton Kutcher because you were upset that he wasn't Charlie Sheen. I'll put it to you like this. When bad things happen to Alan, it's funny because a part of you is thinking, yeah, take that, you parasitic leech. And when bad things happened to Charlie, they were funny because a part of you was thinking, yeah, take that, you walking STD. Joke is less funny in hindsight, but I am talking about the character, not the man. When bad things happen to Walden, they seem less warranted, and therefore not as funny or justified. As you can imagine, all of that's a little bit troubling considering this is a sitcom, so... You know, you're gonna want to make with the funny. Remember way back when I said that Walden Schmidt showed promise? Well, he did. At first. But he stopped showing it real fast. By the time all was said and done, it was clear that Walden Schmidt was a diamond in the rough that never truly shined. Shortly into his run on 2.5 Men, they completely rewrote his creative blueprint. Suddenly he stopped being the oblivious genius with the heart of gold and head of straw, and he started being prone to outbursts and lashing out. But instead of getting anger management, he just stuck around for a few more years. Unlike some people. It seems like whatever likability there was to the character rapidly dissipated over time. Ashton stayed around for 4 seasons, but Walden was really only likable for about, put together maybe 1.5. Walden Schmidt stops being the charming alien he is about halfway through season 10. This doesn't feel like a steady evolution of the character. He matures not through development, but through the insistence of the writers. And I think he aged for the worst, which, right there with you, bud. It's weird because the character somewhat felt like he was right at home, but the longer he stayed on screen, the more he felt like the odd man out. They didn't know what to do without Charlie, but to make matters worse, it seemed like at times they just didn't know what to do with Ashton. What's really interesting is that 8 years and 8 seasons in, the creative department still were managing to find interesting or otherwise bizarre stories for Charlie Harper. But the Walden Schmidt creative well ran real dry, real quick. By the end of the show, Walden Schmidt is a completely different character from the one who was first introduced. And what's worse is, I don't necessarily think it was for the better. Throughout the course of the show, 12 years, from start to finish, Alan Harper is still Alan Harper. I mean, granted, he definitely worsens with time, but ultimately, he's pretty much the same guy, just less better off. But Walden Schmidt is hardly even recognizable from start to finish over the span of 4 years. And I mean that both in terms of the performance and also physically, just does not look like the same person. Toward the end of the show's run, Walden had no discernible or definable personality. He kind of became the series MacGuffin. Not only was his money constantly referenced, but it was also usually a major plot point in many of these episodes. He was just everyone's get-out-of-jail-free card. His wealth contributed to anything and everything in the show's last 4 seasons. It got the characters into story arcs and out of trouble time and time again. I think in the end, Walden was really just around to finance Alan and prolong the inevitable. Which, to his credit, he did. So, did Ashton Kutcher kill 2.5 Men? I would have to say no. The show was bound to end sometime soon after Charlie left. But I think it only lasted as long as it did without Charlie because of Ashton Kutcher. Walden was far from my favorite sitcom Schmidt, but I don't think he's quite as terrible as a lot of people want to remember him. I don't think people dislike the Walden Schmidt character because they really hate Ashton Kutcher. I think they mostly dislike the character because they really miss Charlie Sheen, which is completely valid. Regardless of anything, the show was going to suffer without him. And they did. But I stand by my statement that Ashton Kutcher wasn't at fault for the show suffering. If anything, he was a much-needed relief. Charlie Sheen leaving is what killed the show. Ashton Kutcher actually prolonged its life. And look, the Ashton Kutcher seasons were definitely far inferior. That is not what is being argued here. The worst episodes of Charlie's 2.5 Men may just be on par with the best episodes of Ashton's 2.5 Men. Were they as fun? No. Were they as heartfelt? Nah. But the fact that they are anything is a complete triumph and credit to Ashton. I think almost anyone could recognize that for the last 4 seasons of 2.5 Men, the show was very obviously on a decline. They were doing poorer in the ratings than they ever had before. If you were to search the worst episodes of 2.5 Men, almost every list would consist almost exclusively of episodes from the show's last 4 seasons. The show was on a downward spiral the minute they got rid of Charlie Sheen. I've heard people claim that the show only lasted 4 more seasons because of Ashton Kutcher. But I'd actually say that the show lasted 4 more seasons only because of Ashton Kutcher. When they removed Charlie Sheen, the show was hemorrhaging. And Ashton was kind of like a bandage on a fatal wound. He did his part, but really, there was nothing anyone can do. Those in charge very obviously didn't have a plan for the show following Sheen's departure. After Charlie was out, 2.5 Men kind of went into survival mode. They were no longer trying to thrive, they were just trying to live. And I personally think that Ashton helped their survival. Anyway, with all that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank y'all for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Oh, and if you like this video and you're interested in seeing more 2.5 Men content, most notably the Charlie years, let me know in the comment section below by saying, enough with this Schmidt.
Goodbye!
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.